Oh,
Hang on.
I'd like to call the Real Estate Facilities and Land Management meeting to order. It's March the 21st, 2023, and it is 5:10 p.m. I'd like to have a moment of silence. Mr. Root,
Yes, sir.
if you would, please give us our invocation.
Yep. Pray with me if you'd like. Well, Father, thank you again for having this time for us set aside that we can come together and do business. Hopefully do it well according to your will. And I know that property, the earth, your creation is very important, and how we improve it, how we go about stewarding it is vitally important. So I pray that you give the committee guidance, your wisdom, a plan, and help us to be good stewards. In your name, amen.
Amen. Glenn, would you lead us in our allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I have a motion to approve the minutes of August the 16th, 2022 regular minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And our next topic is discussion items, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Brock for update and discussion regarding.
I went ahead and said thank you before you were finished. I apologize.
Regarding the Pine Street Annex facility.
Thank you, sir, and I apologize for interrupting. I've had a little bit of coffee this afternoon. So if you'll look in the packets, Mr. Davis and Mr. Hart, this is not new. We have seen this same packet before. We're just revisiting it again as we round the corner once again into the year for a general election, for voter security, for equipment storage, and for document storage, as well as increasing some safety measures here at the Pine Street facility. We did a feasibility study. This is from the end of 2021. Of course, we were moving slowly at the time. We were in the grasp of COVID. And at that time, we were not ready to make a formal commitment for an expansion for services. We did know that we were out of space for certain offices and functions within the county, but at the time, not having an end date or a termination of COVID within our radar, we decided to put this on the back burner for the time being and revisit this when the time was more appropriate for there to be council consideration for this type of expenditure. And for us to take a closer look at the true needs. The feasibility study, as I reviewed, putting back into this backup, is still as relevant today as it ever was. And we all know that the municipalities are having elections coming up this year as well. But more in the last 6 months, we've noticed that our records and archives have started to become an issue for us to maintain proper storage for. Oconee County has storage facilities here at Pine Street in 2 warehouse-style rooms on this wing behind us. We are required to keep certain records in perpetuity, which means forever. They're not heated and cooled spaces. We do with the best we can with what we have in those spaces. But as you all know, we've had an extremely rainy past 1 year, and we have gone through extenuous efforts to try to keep those documents safe and secured. Also here at Pine Street, treasurer, auditor, and assessor have records and document storage, as well as the planning department and building codes, which means we have paper backups to everything that is in a digitized format today. As you all know, records and register of deeds and probate are within their respective offices, but the footprint of this building and the consistency of upgrading the needs for our document storage has become more paramount now, coupled with the idea that we know that we're going to have a general election. When we first discussed this program in 2021, at that time, it was not considered early voting, it was considered absentee voting. Even still, we had an excess of 825 voting participants per day for the entire period of time that early voting is allowed. Now that early voting, not absentee voting, now that early voting has passed, we anticipate crossing 1,000 people per day during a general election period. This building is not established as a voting precinct. It is not very accommodating to the voters that come vote. The parking area can be restricted at times. There are some serious safety concerns with patrons having to line the front sidewalk with there being very poor visibility for traffic exiting right here on the corner of Dietrich and Pine. And there's a secondary use for the upstairs, which is our off-site document storage facility at the former DHEC building over on Booker Drive. This, as you know, is where Clemson Rural Health is. Clemson Rural Health has a wish to expand their community health outreach service for their rural health initiative into the upstairs part of that building over there. We are occupying roughly 5,600 square feet, and it's 100% stuffed with document storage. Most of those are either finance personnel, coroner, or extremely old probate files. So it would just be really nice to have some sort of document archive facility so that old documents can be kept in an orderly and safe fashion under lock and key that's accessible by staff at any time should that be needed. If you'll flip through this study, there are a couple of drawings, there are images. I don't know which one you're looking. Oh, you're on the PowerPoint part? Oh, maybe I'll join you.
I can pull up.
No, you're fine. So as this design is, again, in 2007, 8, somewhere in there, this is Pine Street. The Y-looking building, the backwards Y or the backwards 4 looking building, that is the current facility that we're in right now. So it's kind of reversed on the screen from what we're used to looking at. The proposed site, which would be the upper left-hand corner, roughly the 11 o'clock position, that is where a site plan had already been done in 2007, 2008, when there were discussions about relocating the DSS facility here before we bought the Next Day Air building over on Kenneth Street. So it made logical sense not to reinvent the wheel and to keep a campus feel, because having the annex building accessible to this building would make more sense for customer service as well as that archive facility being within reach and us not having to get into a vehicle, go to another location, find a document, bring it back here, make the copy, and then take it back over there to file it accordingly. The next, that's just a conceptual drawing. We did not go as far as to have anything written or,
I'd like to speak. I was told I have to sign up,
Yes, I did.
or I just sign up here,
We'll
so
start
I
at
can
6.
interrupt you.
no, you're fine. Again, here's just a conceptual outlay of the interior uses for the building. As you all know, during the COVID period, this room was at capacity at 42 patrons. There were several instances in which county business, which was so interesting to the public, and we're happy for that we had to limit access to this council chambers. So we do need a space to where, in the event that we needed to space people out in the future and never rule out another issue, would be a large area for the accommodation for council chambers, which can also be used as for voting space. There's some office space in there. Mr. Reed, I don't know if you want to talk about the relocation of the county attorney, but it would be really nice for us to have secured administrative staff in both functions, so that there's an oversight element to the annex building there. And the yellow portion over here is various use office space as well as a conference room. Inside of here is the restroom area, that's the orange part. In trying to address a previous council member's concern about there being no ability for us to take shelter during a tornado, that would be a hard space and could accommodate up to, I think, 40 people is the plan here. Again, this is just a conceptual drawing, no building plans have actually been made yet. But these would fit the needs of what we anticipate we would require for the next 10 to 15 years. There is a second floor, go back one more for me, Jen, thank you so much. So the second floor here, which was one of the things that I requested them to do, is for future office space, because if the county needs to grow again, there's very little footprint on this particular campus connected by the asphalt that we currently have here, that we would be able to grow. We all know that the service requirements of county government are ever increasing and not very likely going to decrease. The storage facility, we're hoping at some point Department of Archives will allow us to start going digital, but we'd still like to have a place to keep records on hand. Mr. Hart, I think you can speak to this. Just a month and a half ago, one of our third-party vendors had a cyber malware attack. We were unable at that time to locate the documents in-house. Well, we were able to put our hands on paper documents because we went a period of time without having digital access to any record, mortgage, or deed. And having the ability to put our hands on paper put us in a position well ahead of other counties who also use this vendor, who are just frozen for the period of time that that website had been compromised. It seems like I'm a pack rat. Staff picks on me a lot when I'm like, don't throw that away. You can throw away the first draft, but never throw away the final draft. There is a need. There is a need. We were hit here by a cybersecurity attack. We have now experienced one of our third parties that have experienced a cyber attack. And as the world does digitize, that is going to be more common than less common. So the future office space in the light blue area is just for potential future build out, should the need arise. These costs were the 2021 costs, and you'll see that the sheriff's office roof replacement is in this. That will be addressed during the budget meeting on Friday. That roof replacement was never completed because the $850,000 estimate was considerably under what the contractors and engineers' design reflected when we got pre-bid numbers. The administration building, the building we're all sitting in here, I really hate to say this out loud on the air, but there's no denying this is one of the hardest buildings to verify security in. We have 11 entrances and exits. We have limited amounts of security that we can provide because of the needs of our citizens, and those needs are always going to come first. The needs of the citizens to be able to access public serving offices in this building and the layout of the building, and because it is an old school, for instance, that wall right there is not a concrete wall because this at one time was the cafeteria. But if you start to venture out in either one of the two wings or in the back hallway, the expansion or moving of offices is very limited and very cost prohibitive because a lot of our interior walls are concrete or block. So there's a limit to what you can do inside of those, and there's a limit on how you can give one office an extra amount of space and divide a classroom, old classroom, in half. So there would need to be some changes. We'd recommend some changes here at this building. You got them? Thank you. To increase security measures on the public-facing offices. We have, in the past 3 years, we did do a security assessment through the tactical analytical security team with the sheriff's office. We have implemented at least 3 of the recommendations every year. But one of the recommendations for securing the entry and exit ways in this building is infeasible because we are a service industry. I don't ever think that I would get to the point that I would recommend that we close off any portion of this building to the public, because it is a public building. We are here to serve the public. However, increasing safety for citizens entering into this building should be considered as we work on the consideration for an annex facility here. Further, the last but very important step. After the voting machines are utilized during the early voting period, most of them have to be reset, or the early voting period machines. In one of the pictures, is it in the slideshow? On the assessment one, looks like that. If you'll look at these top two pictures specifically, these are the precinct materials bags that we pack with information and poll data that goes to each one of the county's precincts. Those literally sit in the hallway. While we do have cameras and we do our very best to monitor them, we have an all eyes on the blue bags for the period of time that they're here, those bags are not very secure. In the interest of having security for those, that's where the annex facility building, the yellow office space area, that is a passkey only entry, so that we can verify 100% that all equipment related to voting prior to the election and up until that election is certified is in a highly secure area with only authorized access to the equipment that goes to both the precinct and what comes back here after the voting process. Do we have questions? Did I address everything concerning? Did I skip anything? Mr. Davis, I know you used to be chair of this committee.
Mr. Chair, the recent inspections that's coming through, I guess we've had Homeland Security.
They're coming this week, yes, sir.
They're coming this week. Do they make any recommendations of, or is it more of a request, or is it don't do this anymore, or here's a better way of doing this?
So, under our previous registration and election director, Ms. Sherritt, who was just as wonderful, she had been in the job for a really long time, we had the Homeland Security, they come every few years. They gave a list of recommendations at that time. I don't know that they were requirements, I was not administrator during the time that that visit was made, but I may be able to get my hands on my document, but Homeland Security will be visiting this week. I anticipate, I hate to say this on the record, but I'm gonna say it, we have the ability to do the best that we can. We have an above average ability to make the absolute best out of what we have. But it's not that it's not people doing it. We don't have the structure that allows for us to do it. If we lost any dedication of any one of the volunteers or the board members or any staff member, or just had someone come in with straight up malice in their hearts and in their beings, we would have a very difficult time saying that they were 100% secured at all times. So the bottom picture here, that is when the machines come back. So as you see, they just line the hallways. Again, we're open to the public. I don't believe that anybody has ever tampered with a machine. I hope that we could say that we have the kind of citizenry that would never do that, but we can't prevent anyone from trying if we can't protect the machines.
Mr. Chairman, it'd be my recommendation, maybe we'll have their recommendations back by the next committee meeting to
Yes.
discuss that then, that way we can
Yeah.
look at that. So they come every 5 years?
I cannot answer that with accuracy, I'm sorry. I wanna think
I
you're
know it's not
right.
every year.
It's not annually.
Yeah.
I think the last time they came was prior to the 2020 election, and it may be that they come a set period of time previous to your next general election. And, voting is a hot topic. The number of voters that we have is increasing, not decreasing. We'd always like to see 100% voter turnout, of course.
It may be.
100% voter turnout, that would be
Never know.
fantastic. It would be a
As long
rough
as it
day
keeps
here,
climbing.
it would be a rough period of time here at Pine Street. And just to go on that one step further, I don't know if any of you have ever voted here at Pine Street, but this chambers that we're sitting in right now is an absentee precinct. And inside of here, we have the cones and we've got the ropes and we've got as many people as we can, but there's really not a lot of privacy. And it just isn't very kind to the voter. Now, we are abiding by the law, but it would be very nice for them to have the ability to relax for a minute while they're going to a polling place, to have a moment of privacy and not have to say their name, address, or any of those things. Because if you don't have your ID card on you, you have to come to the information table to get it verified. As you know, this room is not very big. It might seem big, but it's not very big when you get 200 people in here trying to vote. And of course, the voters are lined up down the hall that way. They're lined up out the door this way. It's just not very accommodating.
And not that this is I guess, an election meeting, but it also could be, as we continue to move forward with early voting, obviously being part of what we're doing, we can also look at other avenues which would require some funding to have other areas open for early voting, which would encourage higher voter turnout as well.
It would. There are some restrictions, I think, on opening precincts early. I think you can vote in certain places early.
Correct.
But it might make sense if we were to request that the cities open early, because the cities have dedicated voting spaces. It may be difficult for, say, the city of Seneca, because theirs is in a gymnasium, if they have activities going on at that time that are scheduled. I don't know. That's Christy Burr, the current director of voter registration. She could probably address that with 100% accuracy, where I'm 80% probably.
We've talked about it a number of years with some of the fire stations that have the ability to look into that as we move forward. Again, it's just, for us to kind of talk about if we're constructing anything or building anything to have those openings that would not interfere with the day-to-day operations. There's no way you could do early voting in some of the gyms just because it would interrupt all that. But early voting is definitely an encouraging way to get people to come out and vote. So as we move forward, it's something for council to consider and work with the Elections Commission on, because it would, as some of the buildings that we do own do have that ability to have rooms and stuff available for that, but it would take some additional funding from the county to do that. But at the same time, encouraging voter turnout is huge. So, and it wouldn't be every precinct, it'd be locations similar to how we have our, solid waste in those areas. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I do want to add that I did ask the grants administrator, Ms. Martin, to do some research about the federal appropriations from EDA, Homeland Security appropriations, to look for any potential grants, so that I could bring you the comfort of saying there were some grant funds. Up till this afternoon at 4:30, we were not able to locate any specific for secured voting. So this would probably, I'm just gonna be upfront about it, be a county expenditure, 100%. We may be able to get some smaller grants for accessibilities or something of that nature, but strictly for voting and a precinct upgrade, we have not been able to locate anything as of today.
Are there do you know of any funding that could be used or looked for improving county facilities like this that we're wanting to do?
Yes, sir. We do currently have an application in for an administrative upgrade for government facilities through the U.S. Tribal Lands Grant. The maximum amount for that, I think, is $285,000. That would certainly get started on some of the security assessment needs here.
Well, I'm like Mr. Davis, I'd recommend bringing it back to committee after Homeland Security's been here, because having been and worked at Duke, and I hate to keep bringing up Duke, but knowing their security and their, retention policy for certain documents, I'm curious as to what they're gonna recommend, and it could be regulations that we'll have to, that could possibly force us into this,
Right.
so that's what I'd like to do. Any other business, Glenn?
I'm good.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much.